Hello, I'm Trey. Welcome to another of my colouring tutorials. I'm going to be working on a design by Tanya, Bogema, Stolova. I think that's how you pronounce it. From her book Nice Little Town 4. I've scanned the design and printed it on the textured cream card I've used in a different tutorial. I'm using pencils I've not used with this card before. I'm going to be using Castle Art Premium pencils and Marco Refined pencils to see how they work with this card. I don't like grayscale, but I do like designs with a little bit of shading in, so this will be a bit of fun to try these pencils on this card with the shading. I picked my colour palette this time by choosing one colour that I wanted to use, and I wanted to use brown because I wanted to do the roofs on this house brown. So I've chosen my colours going from brown that might complement and contrast with that. One of the colours I've chosen is blue, and I'm going to be using the Castle Art for the blue, and I'm going to do the building, main part of the building in blue. The first colour I'm going to put down is the lightest shade of blue I'm working with, and that will go all over all of the main of the building. I think I'll do the windows frames a different colour as well, just to make it more interesting. Now, when I printed this design off, I used draft print settings, and that's to hopefully avoid any bleeding when I try and blend later on. Put down a rough first layer in the lightest blue I'm using. I'm now going to work in the shaded sections for the main of the building, and I'm going to be using my medium blue. And also, while I'm doing this, I'm probably picking up there's going to be areas that hasn't been shaded by the original artist that I might shade in, but I might decide on that later on after I've just used the shading that's already there. I'm now using my darkest blue for this project and going over the shaded areas again, around the edging of the shaded areas, so there's more of a, you know, a gradient effect with the shading. I'm looking at this, I do see areas I feel that might have a little bit more. I mean, underneath these toadstools might have more. Little areas like that, but I feel I'll wait and see how it looks with 1 or 2 layers on before I decide on that. Even though there is shading in the design, it still gives you plenty of scope to play with it and choose a little bit of your own shading, so that's quite nice really. That's why I like it, just a little bit of shading but not too much. So it enables you to be artistic. Now there's areas here I think we'll probably have a little bit more shading, unless I'm not quite picking up how the design works. That roof is coming down here, so it would cast a shadow underneath here and there as well, you know, underneath the eaves is a little bit. So I'm just going to put a little bit of shading in there. Right, well that's the first layer for every colour I'm using for the blue. It does need a few more layers, so I'll do that and see how it's working out. I put down 1 more layer of all of those blue colours I use, the darkest, the medium and the light, and I also extended a little bit of the shading. Underneath here I felt should be a, you know, a little bit of shading I wanted, and no extra shading at the bottom a little bit, and that's okay. I mean, I think it needs a little bit of a blend now. There's some large areas, so I'm just going to use a dry cotton bud. It doesn't tend to work brilliantly this for me, but I want to be able to put more layers down. This textured card needs a few layers to look half decent, and if I do a little bit of blending it'll help not have to put as many down as I want, you know, as I need to. I'll just do the biggest areas first and then I'll use my blender pencil. It would work much better with baby oil, but I know that if I did baby oil at this point I wouldn't be able to go back over it with any more pencil, so I'm just trying to do a little bit of blending with a dry cotton bud. This works quite well with Prismacolor using a dry cotton bud, but not so much with the cheaper pencils. Right, I'll try the blender pencil now. Just doing this lightly so I can get some more layers down. I do the blending not just to smooth things out, but also to try and save putting down too many layers, because I'm trying to work on a budget, and soft core pencils do run down very quickly. So even though I'm light with my layering and colouring, they still run down, they still rub down. So this saves me using so many layers, so it saves my pencils. I get more use out of them. You compromise a little bit on that with how it looks, because obviously the more layers you put down, the better it looks. Now I'm going to do a little bit more of the layers again, starting with the darkest layer, darkest blue in the shaded areas. I use this just around the edging of the shaded areas. I did put some shading underneath this eave. I felt there would be a little bit there. And I extended all the shading a little bit with the medium blue. I also put some shading around this door so it will stand out a little bit more. There wasn't any there, and also there's like a section where the door's attached to. I put some shading around the edges of that too, so it stands out a little bit more. And I put a little bit of shading underneath this eave, part of the roof. Now I'll do the medium blue in the shaded area, and I'll be extending the shaded area. I just thought it would look quite nice, slightly more extended. It's handy this shading isn't too much, because it gives you the option to be able to be artistic and change it a little bit. That's something that grayscale all over doesn't do. You don't tend to have that option. I'm going over the dark areas as well, just to blend that darkest blue a little bit, overlapping. When I'm doing my colouring, I don't tend to increase my pressure as I put more layers down. I mean, not by much. I still tend to keep it quite light. I think I'm always concerned I'm still going to go wrong at some point. I put a little bit of shading underneath this flower and leaves. Just extended that a little bit. So now I just need to do one more layer of the lightest blue, which I'll go to use and go all the other layers of the blue. Now I've finished the third layer of the lightest blue. Now this card is quite textured, and it's kind of similar to some of the papers in Joanna Basford's books, and they're difficult to cover with pencils when they're very textured. So what I try to do is I change the direction of my colouring each layer. So the first layer I went that way, the second layer I went that way, and the third layer I went back to the original direction. And it helps fill in, you know, the texture of the card or the paper you're using. I mean, smaller areas I do almost like scrumble effect, but it's the bigger areas that I have to do the other way. It does help a little bit fill it in. So now I'm going to do a little bit of blending on camera and see how this works. These pencils have worked quite nicely with this paper. I've not used Castle Art before with this textured card, but they've worked quite nicely, and because they blend really nice, I mean, especially with my blender pencil. And you know, it's blending and evening out quite nicely. I'm still only using a medium pressure for this, you know, slightly harder than before for this blend. And that's because it's printed. However, I'm not getting any bleed at all, even though it's printed, even from the shaded sections. So printing out on draft seems to be working quite well with this card. I find when I'm using these pencils, you know, these blender pencils, they work better if I change the direction as well when I'm blending. So I'll go one direction and I'll go on the other, and it tends to blend a bit better. A little bit difficult when you're trying not to bleed into another section with colour, but otherwise, you know, that works quite well with these pencils. I mean, I have had bleeding from printed as well, not anything I've printed myself, but from purchased magazines or books on occasions. One of the Colour in Heaven magazines I got, when I went to blend with it, it actually bled, you know, the line art bled. That's a little bit frustrating, you know, you try to find other ways to blend instead. I ended up using a cotton bud with that because I couldn't use anything else. Right, so that is the main building of the house done for this design, and I've decided to do shorter videos, if possible, tutorials. So I'm going to be doing more to complete a project rather than less. So this is the end of part 1 of this tutorial. I hope you found it useful, some tips, and please do leave any comments, and I'll be interested to read them and see if I can help if you have any queries. So bye for now, and I'll see you next time.